Hey everyone, and welcome back to Database History. We love to talk about the giants, the oracles, the SQL servers, but what about the unsung heroes, the tools that did the heavy lifting before database was a household name? Well, today we're diving into one of my favorites, RMS. That's Record Management Services. It was a file system on the old VAX/VMS systems that, honestly, it thought it was a database, and it was pretty darn good at it. All right, so to really get RMS, you've got to transport yourself back in time. We're talking late 70s, early 80s. Forget the PC on every desk. This was the age of the mini computer, and the absolute king of that world was Digital Equipment Corporation. DEC. Their VAX computers, oh man, they were everywhere. They were the workhorses powering everything from university labs and government offices to the back office of your local factory. Just solid, reliable machines. So here's the problem developers had back then. You're building an application, right? You need to handle real data, stuff like customer lists, inventory, scientific results. You need structure. But what were your options? A full-on relational database? A lot of the time, it was overkill. Way too expensive, way too complicated, or maybe it just didn't exist for your system yet. So you're stuck in this middle ground. A plain text file is too simple, but a huge database engine is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And right into that gap steps RMS. I love this quote because it just nails it. It wasn't relational, it wasn't hierarchical, it was practical. That's the key word right there. RMS wasn't built to impress academics or win some debate on data theory. No, it was built for programmers in the trenches who just needed to get the job done. And boy, did it deliver.
So what was RMS, really? Let's dig into the nuts and bolts, because this was so much more than your average file system.
Okay, first and foremost, RMS was a set of services that were literally baked into the VAX/VMS operating system. This is maybe the most important thing to understand. It wasn't some extra piece of software you had to go out and buy. It wasn't an add-on. If you were running VMS, you already had RMS. It was just there, part of the toolkit, ready to go right out of the box. And just look at what it could do. I mean, seriously, this list reads like a feature sheet for a modern database. You had different ways to organize files, including the all-important indexed files. That meant you could grab one specific record instantly by its key. No more reading a whole file from the beginning. It had record-level locking. Think about that. That's huge. It means two people could be working on the same file at the same time and not trip over each other. And journaling? That's your safety net. If the power goes out, your data is safe. This was serious, grown-up data management built right into the OS. And here's the beautiful part. This is how you actually used it. There was no separate query language like SQL to learn. You just used it right from your code. Whether you were writing in COBOL, Fortran, or BASIC, you made calls directly to RMS. It felt totally natural, like just another part of the language. For developers at the time, this was a dream. It just made sense. Okay, so it was cool tech, we get it. But why did it matter? Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. Because RMS wasn't just some neat feature. It was the quiet workhorse, the unsung hero that made the whole VAX/VMS ecosystem possible. I mean, think about it. For countless businesses, RMS was the engine running their most critical systems. We're talking accounting, payroll, inventory, the absolute lifeblood of the company. In science labs, it was wrangling huge amounts of data from experiments, where losing even one record could be a disaster. And for governments, it was the backbone for all sorts of secure, reliable data processing. Why? Because it was fast, it was tough as nails, and it was just the default go-to choice. And this quote just says it all. It blurred the line between file and database, and it did so elegantly. For a whole generation of programmers, that hard line we draw today between a file and a database, it just wasn't there. RMS lived right in that blurry in-between space. It gave you, 80% of what you'd want from a database, but with practically none of the complexity or overhead. Just a beautiful, elegant solution. All right, let's pop the hood for a second and get a little more technical. How did RMS pull this off? How did it give you all this power and structure without having a formal database schema like we think of today? Well, this comparison really tells the story. On the one hand, you've got your standard text file. It's just a long stream of characters. If you want to find something, you have to start at the top and read all the way through. But then you look at an RMS file on the right. It's a whole different world. The file itself knows it's made up of individual records and that each record has a specific structure. And the secret sauce? The index. It lets you just ask the system, hey, go get me the customer with ID 12345, and bam, it goes right there, instantly.
And this leads to a really profound idea. It was structure without schema, logic without layers. What does that mean? It means the definition of the data, the structure, lived inside your application code in your COBOL record definitions, for example, not in some separate external database system. This made everything so direct. Your data logic was right there, part of your program. There was no extra layer you had to go through. It was incredibly efficient.
So, let's zoom out. In the big, grand history of data that we love to explore here, where does RMS fit? Well, it plays a really special and, frankly, super important role. You can see the journey right here. Back in the 60s, you had these really basic sequential files. Then RMS shows up in the 70s and 80s, and it's a game changer. It introduces all these database-like ideas, indexed access, record locking, right at the operating system level. You could say it taught a generation of developers how to think about data in a more structured way. It got them used to the idea of keys and indexes and data integrity way before SQL and the big relational databases really dominated everything in the late 80s and 90s. And that's really its legacy, isn't it? It's the bridge. RMS is the technology that carried the entire industry from the world of simple flat files over to the world of complex, powerful databases that we have today. No, it wasn't a full database itself, but it got the world ready for them. And you know what's crazy? You can still see echoes of its philosophy today in things like embedded databases or certain NoSQL systems, where the data and the application logic are super tightly integrated. That core idea, it never really disappeared. So that's our look at the amazing RMS. And now I really want to turn it over to you. I know some of you out there must have lived this. Did you ever build a system on a VAX? Did you ever write COBOL code that talks directly to RMS? If you did, please share your stories down in the comments. We would absolutely love to hear them. Hey, if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Because next time on Database History, we're tackling a system built for a world where failure is not an option. We're talking about Nonstop SQL, the database that was engineered from the ground up to never, ever go down. It's going to be a good one. We'll see you then.